Hello. So I just got back from running to the library, literally, hence showered hair, to pick up books for this video. So I am embarking on a video series adventure, which will be reading outside of my comfort zone. That can be genres, that can be age ranges, styles, anything that I don't normally read for one reason or another. So first up, I decided to give myself an easy, soft start, and we are starting with middle grade. So I have already started one of these. I am listening to Elatsoe by Darcy Little Badger, and this is technically YA, but I was reading reviews on Storygraph, and almost universally people say that it reads more like middle grade than YA, and they mostly say that in a very negative way, so a lot of them were reviewing it badly, saying that it reads like middle grade, not YA, which to me is a very strange reason to give a book a bad rating. I don't care whether it's middle grade or YA as long as it's a good book, but I thought I would just set myself up for success and just go ahead and read it as a middle grade. I am already 30% through and I love it so far. And then I thought I would pick two books from someone that I know that reads a lot of middle grade, since, a lot of these are not going to be books that are on my radar. I am, for any videos that I don't already have ideas of what books to read, I am going to be picking books from people that I know. One of the people that I follow on Instagram that I would consider an Instagram friend, we have talked before, is Trisha Wants to Read, and so I went and looked at some of her posts about favorites, about reviewing books that are considered middle grade, and I picked out two, one of which is still on its way to the library, but the first of which is Kiki Kalira Breaks a Kingdom. We'll just talk about the blurb here. This is a fantasy and apparently incorporates a lot of Indian myths and legends, and so I'm very excited to get into that one. I was particularly excited to read middle grade, and I think that it will be particularly rewarding to read middle grade because I have wanted to get into it for a long time. I find that middle grade doesn't have a lot of the tropes and a lot of the romance that I really don't like in YA, but yet has the same or even greater levels of diversity and creativity that I think middle grade and YA are so good for and adult fiction is often not good for. So anyway, I've rambled enough, but I'm very excited about these. I am also reading a middle grade in Spanish. I don't think I will finish it in this vlog because I am reading it as part of a book club, and that doesn't end until the end of September. But this is La Leyenda del Bosque, which is the first book in the Los Dioses del Norte series by Jara Santamaria. This has not been translated into English, so if you read Spanish, then check this out. It has been very, very endearing and creative so far, but again, I don't think it's been translated, so. Okay, so we just read the first 3 chapters of this before I have to go somewhere this evening, but this is starting out so good. So this has obviously Indian representation and also OCD representation, and the author herself did, I'm not sure if she currently has OCD or did at one point, but so good so far, and I love how fast it is to read. I mean, that's sort of obvious, I guess, with middle grade, but it is a perk because sometimes adult, you can read for like an hour and then you look down and you're like, wow, I have really not made progress. So anyway, I will check back in when I have more progress. Hello. So I am close to finishing Kiki Kalira Breaks a Kingdom. I have about close to 100 pages left, but it goes very, very quickly. So I think I should be able to finish this today at the park. finished it. It was precious. It made me cry a little bit. I think that this is such a great book for anyone to read, particularly younger people, but literally anybody. I felt so like a warm hug reading it. It was incredibly endearing. There's several like cute things that I would want to talk about, but I don't want to talk about because I want people to read it and experience it for themselves. This does definitely touch on some heavier topics, mental health, and there is a character death, which is really, really sad and not necessarily expected for middle grade, but I think that it was handled really well, and I think that this is something, again, that would just benefit so many people to read, myself included. It just has such positive messages, such endearing writing, funny writing. There were a few little like plot holes or inconsistencies that, I noticed, but they didn't bother me at all. And I definitely think as like a middle grade reader, I wouldn't have even noticed them. But yeah, such a success that I actually put myself on the holds list for the audiobook of the second in this series at my library. Big, big success, and I think that everyone should read this. Go do it! Hello. So, last night I finished Aletsuwe, and I really, really liked it. So this is the story of a Lipan Apache girl who is 17, and her cousin is killed, and she's trying to both find out what happened to him and get justice for him. So the topics that it discusses are a little bit more YA. I can see why it has been categorized as YA, for that reason. And because of the age of the main character, I do agree with a lot of the reviewers who said that it reads a little bit more like middle grade though. I think some of the violence, it's not extremely violent, but I think it would be pretty violent for a middle grade reader, but there are some minorly cringeworthy dialogues, and just the character kind of acts maybe a little bit younger than she is, although I can see why, in order for her to have kind of freedom and be able to drive and stuff, it made sense to make her 17. I think also sometimes something that we sometimes forget, or at least I do, about YA is that it's supposed to be for readers that are 13 to 17. So 13 is pretty young. So I think that this makes sense for older middle grade or younger YA readers. I don't think that the criticism of the writing style is really warranted, but I can also understand how if you read it thinking that it was going to be aimed at 16 or 17-year-olds, that maybe you might find some of it a little bit cringeworthy, but honestly, it was so worth it. The world building of this is incredible. It combines kind of indigenous folklore and legends with not indigenous, fairies and that sort of thing. Again, another one that I could tell you endearing things, but I just think that you should read it and discover them for yourself. Really, really, really liked this one. It talks about a lot of serious topics like, police discrimination and racism, inequality, systemic issues, as well as personal issues. I will look for future work from this author, definitely, and I would highly recommend this to just about anybody. If you like fantasy at all, I think that this is well worth the read. Really, really good. Next up, I will be reading Witchlings by Claribel A. Ortega, and this did come in at the library today, so I will be picking it up. But I also discovered that the audiobook is available from the library, so I have started that. I'm about 20% through, and this one is also so endearing. This is a little bit more of a straightforward fantasy, more of a very much reminds me of the Worst Witch series. It's witchy and adorable, and so far, absolutely love it. So I will update you when I've read more of it. We've reached the end. So I finished Witchlings today, and it was absolutely beyond precious. This is a warm hug in book form, but it's full of adventure and all kinds of middle grade intrigue and mystery. But one of the most, if not the most endearing books that I have ever read, and I noted in the author's afterword that she also said that The Worst Witch was part of the inspiration or something to read alongside this, so I felt very validated. So this tells the story of Seven, who is a witchling, which is like a pre-full-fledged witch, obviously, and she is getting like, you know, sorted or assigned to her coven, and she's dreaming of one of the more famous covens or whatever, and she ends up not being where she wants to be, and she's in kind of this group that is outcast from society in a way, and she has to embark on this adventure to kind of stay a part of the society. And it talks about a lot of really serious kind of systemic issues, equality, human rights and that sort of thing, but in such a way that is very obviously entertaining and understandable and not too heavy for, you know, kids. I think that there are a lot of clever, you know, political, social connections being made here, and I think that that's something that's so great for kids to read in that capacity, and obviously for adults as well. It is such a story of acceptance, accepting yourself, accepting other people. The dedication is to anyone who has ever felt they didn't belong, this one's for you. And it was so heartwarming, and I got all teary-eyed, and I cannot wait for the sequel, which I believe is coming out in 2023, I think, if I remember correctly. I also absolutely loved that all of the magic is Spanish. I think, as far as I could tell, all of the spells are in Spanish, and so I just loved the idea of like a little bilingual kid reading it and their language being the language of magic. You know, I don't know if that was the intention, but that was what I read into it, and I loved it. So all three of these were such major, intense successes that I actually am like blown away. I did read entirely fantasy for this. I didn't realize that I was doing that until I'd already done it. So maybe we will have to do another middle grade episode at some point that is not fantasy, but to be honest, fantasy is most of what I read when I was this age, so it does make sense that I was drawn to these specifically. But yeah, I think that the creativity behind middle grade fantasy is just possibly unparalleled. So yeah, I honestly highly recommend every single one of these. Alatsue, definitely heavy topics here, heavy topics in all of them to be honest, but probably the most here, the most violence, but just the world building in this one is incredible. Also, I assumed from the cover that this was set in Alaska. It's set in Texas, so if anybody else, you know, got the wrong impression from this, you do understand what this is by the end of the book, but I assumed that it was like the Arctic looking at it, and it's not. So for some reason that made me even more, you know, into this. I think that she does a good job with kind of the desert setting, and I would not have guessed desert setting from this cover. So anyway, the rating was not a 100% from me, but I don't even care, honestly, because the world was so incredible, the story was good. Yeah. Kiki Kalira was also amazing. I think this would be absolutely great for, you know, Indian kids to read, to see themselves and their, you know, mythology and legends and everything represented, but also great for kids of any ethnicity to read in order to, you know, see heroes everywhere. And yeah, writing was very good, no complaints from me, and I will definitely be listening to the second one when it comes in from the library. And then this one might have been my favorite, to be honest. I loved it so much. I do think that this was the best written. She writes cutesy in a way that is not cringy at all, and I do not think that that is easy to do. This was like cutesy down to the way that they, you know, curse, the way that they refer to other people, like pet names and stuff. It was cutesy through every fiber of its existence. And I loved every single second of it, and I am not someone that I would say is generally drawn to cutesy things. So, incredible. She does already have one book out, which I will be listening to when I get a chance, and I will absolutely be reading the sequel as soon as it comes out. So if you have an Instagram, definitely check out Trisha Wants to Read. Tell her to start a booktube channel. She does have an Etsy shop as well with some cute witchy stickers, which I have ordered from. They are not here yet, but I will show you in a future video when they do arrive. But check out her account for great book recommendations, clearly, and her Etsy shop as well. And thank you to Trisha for introducing me to these wonderful authors, which I will be returning to for sure. So I figured at the conclusion of these videos, I could tell you whether these genres are still out of my comfort zone or not, because the name is maybe a little bit of a misnomer. I mean, I honestly wouldn't say that middle grade was out of my comfort zone in a way where I was nervous to read it in any way. It was just something that I don't generally reach for, so it was kind of out of my comfort zone in that sense. But I would say it is thoroughly inside my comfort zone now, so I will be reaching for it frequently in the future. And I don't think that that will be the case for a lot of these videos. I definitely gave myself an easy success on the first video, but you know, I will not consider this adventure a failure if something is still out of my comfort zone when I finish the video, because I tried and now I know that it is just not necessarily for me, and that is totally fine. But I don't want to shut myself off to wonderful things out of some preconceived notion about the thing or about myself and how I would feel about it when that might not actually be the case. So with that in mind, I will give you a small preview of the next episode of this adventure, which I may or may not regret, like, immediately. I guess I will see you next time.